Welcome to the Get Trauma Informed podcast, dedicated to unraveling the complexities of trauma, its pervasive impact, and the journey towards holistic recovery and realignment. If your radiance has ever felt muted, like I and thousands of others, you're in the right place to reignite your inner light. I'm your host, Wellness Coach Liz Blanding, and this is the Get Trauma Informed podcast. Hi, welcome to a special episode of the Get Trauma Informed podcast. Today we're doing a mini trauma recovery talk on grief, on trauma recovery through grief, navigating the pain. Today is a special episode because I actually had a very, very trying today. I said trying today, meaning trying day to day. I had to record this episode multiple times because grief struck me today. I had started this day off exercising as I normally do on my self-care plan when I received a message from one of my guests from their family member. And when I got in contact with the family member, she informed me that one of my podcast guests had passed away. And it really struck me hard today because when you think about trauma recovery, we talk about staying in recovery and not relapsing. And so, in order to do that, myself being a trauma recovery coach and a trauma practitioner, and all of the different certifications that I have, it still struck me in a very, very challenging way when I received that message. So, I wanted us to understand how grief or grief as trauma, how that actually affects all of us. It doesn't matter who you are, or it does not matter what type of credentialing you have. Trauma is still a real fact of life. And when I see it through me today, I had to reground myself. I had to go back into my toolbox and I had to pull out some of the tools. And so in order to actually get this podcast recorded in a way that I can utilize my experience to help other people, I had to come out in nature. I had to get away from everything brick and mortar. And I had to just ground myself or reground myself and practice what I preach. So, on this special episode, we're going to take a deep dive into grief as trauma. What does it look like? Grief doesn't just come from losing a loved one, but it can also stem from any significant loss, like a relationship or health. Grief can trigger feelings of trauma. I was feeling overwhelmed today and I kept pushing through, but you have a sense of instability. That's what it feels like. So I wanted us to be able to identify it, become aware of what this looks like so that we can now, it snapped in for me today. Go to your toolbox. What are some of the things that you need to do to ground yourself? And I am so grateful to the people that I have around me because they help me. And that's why you have a support system around you. So when you need to reach out, you can do that, right? And you can do that and reestablish your feeling of safety, of stability. So let's talk a little bit about how grief can be a form of trauma because it involves a profound sense of loss, which can disrupt a person's emotional, mental, and even physical well being. Trauma is typically associated with an overwhelming event or an experience that leaves someone feeling helpless or unable to cope. And grief often fits this description. When you lose something or someone deeply significant, a loved one, relationship, a job, or even a sense of security, it can shake the foundation of your identity, your safety, and stability. The emotional pain that follows can be intense, unpredictable, resembling the symptoms of trauma. Okay. And here are some of the symptoms of trauma: emotional numbness or shock. Just like in trauma, grief can cause a person to feel disconnected from their emotions as if the reality of loss has not set in. So sometimes you'll get a feeling of like it's surreal, right? A surreal feeling. Okay. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about emotional numbness and shock, right? Intrusive thoughts or flashbacks. People may experience painful memories or reminders of what they've lost, similar to how trauma victims relive their experiences. Or heightened anxiety and hypervigilance. Grief can lead to a constant state of unease or fear, especially when the loss was sudden or traumatic in nature. Now, here we are also difficulty functioning. And that's what I kind of ran into today. I still stayed the course, but I still had some difficulty in functioning, meaning it was an overwhelming feeling. And that, again, much like in trauma, it disrupts the person's ability to manage ordinary life. So I didn't lose that ability, but it just felt off balance, right? And so I'm sharing this true life experience or real time experience because I want us all to know that no matter who we are, trauma, grief, it can touch us all. But the key to it is to make sure that you have grounding techniques and you have a self-care plan so that you can grab it, or that you have people around you, a support system around you is so important. Grief as trauma is particularly challenging because the loss itself is often permanent, meaning there is no way to reverse the event. Recovery is this in this content is about finding a way to live with this loss rather than erasing the impact. And I want us to really, really sit with that for a minute. So, recovery in this context is about finding ways to live with the loss rather than erase its impact. Understanding grief through the lens of trauma helps us approach it. Okay, so this is important with compassion and recognizing that it is not just sadness. We often get it mixed up. It's not just sadness, it's a deep emotional wound that takes time and support to heal. Support is the key. Oftentimes we feel like we're an island and we have to do it by ourselves. Support is the key, right? Now let's understand the impact of emotional trauma. Grief can manifest in symptoms similar to depression, anxiety, post traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Let's talk about what the symptoms look like for depression. Depression symptoms are persistent sadness or emptiness, fatigue or low energy, loss of interest in activities, changing in sleep patterns, whether it's insomnia, difficulty in sleeping or oversleeping, appetite and weight changes, meaning that a significant loss of weight or gain in weight because we're overeating or we're not eating anything, feelings of worthlessness or guilt, those are huge in depression, difficulty concentrating and focusing, and thoughts of death or suicide. That's how you know that you are in a depression and you want help to come out of that. Symptoms of anxiety, excessive worry or fear, restlessness or feeling on edge. You have inability to relax or cope with feelings of being on high alert all the time, like those stress responses of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. You're always on that panic button. Physical symptoms such as tension in the body, headaches, muscle aches, stomach issues, or even dizziness or shortness of breath can all be signs of anxiety. Difficulty concentrating and racing thoughts, irritability, or panic attack. Sudden episodes of intense fear, right? Accompanied can often be accompanied by physical symptoms like rapid heartbeat, sweating, and trembling. Now let's talk about PTSD symptoms. Intrusive thoughts or flashbacks, nightmares, avoidance behavior, meaning avoiding people, places, or activities that remind us of the loss or trauma, emotional numbness, that's a huge one. It's feelings of disconnected from one's emotions or even the world around them. Okay. Or if you're feeling like you're in a haze, hypervigilance. This is a big one too. A heightened sense of awareness where the person's feelings constantly on guard, like you're on guard or you feel threatened. Irritability or dangerous outbursts or angry outbursts. Difficulty controlling your emotions, particularly anger. Okay. And we can continue on with the PTSD symptoms. PTSD symptoms, difficulty in sleeping, like with anxiety, exaggerated startled response, being easily startled by sudden noises or movement, Okay, and that's reflecting a state of heightened sensibility. These symptoms can overlap, and grief can amplify feelings of depression, anxiety, and PTSD. When you recognize these symptoms early, it's crucial that you seek out help and support for recovery and also for recovery relapse. We have a program coming up October the 14th that's going to help us in our recovery. And you're going to be able to see it down in the description box. Where if you need that help with getting into recovery or you need that support, we are there to help you. We're going to walk through the pathway to trauma recovery. We're going to walk through the book with the authors and helping us to implement these different practices that's going to help us to be better, right? And to live full out, because there is help on the other side of this. There is help while we're in it and on the other side, I should say. Common reactions are shock, denial, anger, dissociation, and a profound sadness. Grief can disrupt one's emotional balance and ability to function. Okay, we talked about the signs and the symptoms. Let's talk about some coping mechanisms. Okay, coping mechanisms and some recovery tools can include journaling, writing about the emotions connected to the grief. It helps you to process those feelings. Meditation and mindfulness. I talked about grounding techniques. I came out and had to be in nature in order to get through the day. So grounding techniques to bring focus back to the present. Okay. Talking to a support system. Okay. We encourage you to reach out to your friends, family, or therapists, or even coaches, right? You can even do rituals of remembrance to help you to create a personal way to honor the person or the loss, lighting candles, creating memory spaces, right? The importance of giving yourself time and grace, being, oh my goodness, being gentle with yourself. It's okay, right? Why do we feel we always have to be harsh and have to be in the hustle and bustle of things, right? Giving yourself, giving yourself time and grace. Grace has no timeline, well, grief, I'm sorry, has no timeline, and it takes time to recover. So give yourself that grace to recover. It's a good practice to be patient with yourself, avoid rushing the process. And there's a boundary that other people are not able to cross, right? And so we have to establish those boundaries so that we can take care of ourselves. It's okay to take care of ourselves. It's a good practice to be patient with yourself, avoid rushing the process, and respect your own emotional journey. You give yourself that respect first before you ask others to do that. And seeking professional support, it's important to seek professional trauma recovery support when it's needed, right? Because oftentimes we think we have to be an island and do it ourselves, and that's not the case. There are loving people around that will help you to get through it. So you may want to check into a coach, support group, such as the Pathway to Trauma Recovery book study and support group that will be launching on October the 14th, a support group, a therapist, or a good grief counselor, right? You want to find that community because we are out there. Remember, recovery from the grief is a process, from your grief. From grief is a process, and you're not alone. It's okay to ask for help, right? Through the pain, I want you to hear this. The pain may never fully disappear, right? So let's set the proper expectations. It is possible to grow stronger through grief, reflecting on good times and the good that you have to offer the community, right? You have good to offer. Your contribution to the world is important and it's just as unique as your fingerprint. So I just want to be of encouragement. I got through today. I had some wonderful support systems around me. I am so grateful for that because once upon a time, I too thought that I had to be an island. I had to be this superwoman, right? And nothing could bother me and I couldn't let other people in. And I was smiling faces because I was smiling on the outside, tears coming down my face, torn apart on the inside, all made up, and I still was not whole. But until I went through my process of recovery, the recovery process that I want to share with you, until I went through that process, I was not whole. I was fragmented. And I was just going along life to get along, people pleasing and doing all the unhealthy things. and in denial when grief came about. But it's okay, and it is a process. So I look forward to seeing you on the inside of our program. And please continue showing up and listening to the podcast. We are pouring it out for you. Halfway to Trauma Recovery book and the authors. We just want to make sure that everybody understands that there are so many types of trauma, but hopefully one of our voices can resonate with you and help you to get the help that you need. All righty. Hope to see you on side of the program, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Get Trauma Informed podcast. Bye for now, and be safe.
It's time to buckle up. No more suffering in silence. Our Power Pack journey to recovery and realignment starts now. Remember, you are collateral damage on someone else's warpath. Trauma is not your fault. Recovery, however, is your responsibility. I'm your host, Wellness Coach Liz Blanding, and this is the Get Trauma Informed podcast.